welcome to the YQGgreen Expo, first annual. And what a great night to be here celebrating Waste Reduction Week. We've got a great conversation lined up. So we have our main sponsor here tonight, the Port Authority of Windsor, who I think is honestly going to blow you away by some of the facts that they share here tonight. No pressure there, Steve.
Yeah.
And honestly, like, it's a hidden gem. And what it does for our city and our region, and honestly our province at this point, is pretty incredible. And so Steve here, Steve Salmon, who's president and CEO of the Port, is going to do a talk a little bit about why Waste Reduction Week and why they're starting here. And then we also have a conversation with one of our clients at We Tech Alliance. And so if you're not familiar, maybe show of hands, who here knows who We Tech Alliance is? Oh wow, much more. NPP Dowie, thank you for joining us. And so if you're not familiar, We Tech Alliance is a regional innovation center. We're actually one of 17 across Ontario. And what's beautiful about We Tech and what we do really well are sort of three core things. We work within our community to help build the tech community here in Windsor, Essex, and Chatham-Kent. We work to accelerate small businesses or tech and innovation type businesses from the stage of the idea all the way through to scale and everything in between. And we also work to help people connect with jobs in the tech industry. And so we've got sort of three different funnels that we work within and three pillars of programs that we're able to sort of offer to our community. And today, why we're here is we're going to be talking about waste reduction and really the idea that the economy is shifting for us. It's shifting towards more sustainability, and it isn't something that's a growing part of our economy. This is going to be the entire thing in the next little bit. All businesses have to start thinking in this way. And so Steve and Kyle here, who's joining us, are going to talk about why that's so important. And so the other gentleman that I have to introduce today is Dr. Kyle Bassett. And Kyle is founder and CEO of a company called Climate Neutral. And Climate Neutral is one of the clients that we work with at We Tech Alliance. And Climate Neutral really focuses in on helping municipalities and industry look at how they're affecting their greenhouse gas output, how they're measuring greenhouse gas and emissions, and how they're actually putting that into action and making it a little bit easier for themselves to manage this monster of a process that we all need to start undertaking. And so with that, and without further ado, we're going to give it over to Steve. And Steve, sort of first question here. Why waste reduction? Why is that so important to the Port? And what is the Port doing locally to ensure a greener future for our city?
Well, thank you, Adam. I'll try and maintain the same kind of energy.
Good luck.
I'm not going to.
So many coffees.
So look, when it comes to the Port Authority, everybody knows us as an economic agency, right? We're the people that bring goods in by ship and out by ship to other ports across the Great Lakes and across the world. Doesn't seem like much of an environmental, but we also have a second value statement. We have three, actually, the second one being social, where we are engaged and committed and involved in our community, why we're here tonight. But on the topic tonight of environment, that's also our third core value of our organization: environment, social, economy. So on the environment, shipping is the greenest form of transportation available today. Look at, when we think of moving goods and stuff, we think of trucks. We see trains at crossings, and occasionally we'll see a ship on the river. But the fact is, 80% of everything you touch, you eat, you wear, you sleep, you sit on, has been on a ship at some point in its product lifetime. 80%. And 80% of those goods do produce 3% of the world's greenhouse gases. But it's not a bad trade-off, 80% for only 3%. Of that 3%, the industry is intensely involved in getting that to zero by 2050. Let me tell you a few other things. When you move 1 ton of product 1 kilometer, a ship will emit 1 gram of carbon. A rail will emit 2 grams, a truck 9 grams. So the more we can move shipment of bulk goods for long distances across water, so much better for our environment, decongestens our highways, makes our roadways safer. It also removes carbon outputs, even when we move it from rail. Look, we're always going to need rail to move cross country. We can't move the ship to Edmonton. So we're going to need rail, but we don't need rail from Halifax to Windsor or Halifax to Thunder Bay. We can reduce carbon outputs by a factor of 9, and that's good for our community. We also know that there's congestion out there. Our railways are at capacity. There is no more room for railway. We need to move stuff to marine, and it's good because it's cheaper and it's better environmental decision. It's greener choice. Secondly, trucking. Trucking companies are desperate for long-distance drivers. They're simply not available. So again, if we're going to move a product, we're going to move a container from Montreal or Halifax to Windsor, let's do it by ship. We can move more of them, cheaper and greener.
Fantastic, thank you. And so when we're looking at the port, how long, oh no, we're not done with you, sir.
Oh, wow. I'm out.
How long has the port been around in our region?
In its current form as a national port, so there are 17 national ports in Canada, created by Canada in 1999. The national ports were chosen for strategic locations across the country. Windsor, I don't think often appreciates, because I didn't appreciate when I came into this job more than 5 years now, that having an international port at your doorstep is a doorway to the world. It's an economic advantage in terms of intermobility and shipment of goods that communities across Canada, would absolutely be thrilled about. There would be champagne corks popping in any other community in this country if they got a national port. We have one. We're just one of 17 in the entire country. We are there with Vancouver and Montreal and Hamilton, Thunder Bay, Halifax. Of course, when we think of a port, they're usually nice horseshoe shapes. Like when we think of Vancouver, it's big inland water. Hamilton, gorgeous, horseshoe, on the inside of the bridge. Windsor, we have a linear port, just like Montreal, like Quebec, like Trois-Rivières. It's a linear port. What I grew up knowing as the Detroit River, I now know, and you should all know, it's actually the port of Windsor. That's our harbor. And it is one of the busiest harbors in the country. It's the 3rd busiest in Ontario, the 10th busiest in the country.
Fantastic. And when we're looking at the kind of economic activity, and so, Mayor Dudikounts was scheduled to be here today to share some things with us. But when you look at the type of infrastructure projects that are going on right now, we have a massive battery plant that is a once-in-a-generation investment that's coming into our community. We have the Gordie Howe Bridge that's just, mere months away from being finished and opening up to the public. A lot of the materials, a lot of the sediment has come through the port. And so there's so many infrastructure pieces that wouldn't be possible. And then when you look at our greenhouse industry, and this is one of my favorite facts, how many vegetables, one of every what, comes through the port?
Ooh, I'm going to disappoint you there. We don't ship vegetables.
I don't know.
Grain. We ship grain. That's the question you want to answer. And it's a much better question and a much more exciting answer. When you drive through Essex County, Kent County, or Lambton County, 7 out of every 10 fields of grain are coming to Port Windsor. So we're an agriculture industry. We are not just a waterfront, not just an urban, we're also a rural industry. 7 out of every 10 farmers depend on the Port of Windsor. Again, it's that critical link to the supply chain, that critical economic advantage we have in Windsor by having a national port. The grains from the Port of Windsor are traveling to Europe, South America, Central America, and we also are bringing in grains for oil crushing, the largest oil crushing facility in the Great Lakes, right here in Windsor. When you buy a 4-liter jug of oil, I don't care what the label is on front. If it says Kirkland, it's definitely coming from Port Windsor. If you get French fries from McDonald's, Burger King, or Wendy's, it's coming from Port Windsor, that oil.
So cool. So thank you. And I think it's so important to note, this is how it touches us, right? There's nothing that occurs here in our region that isn't a part of port or hasn't gone through.
Adam, the big news, of course, last year was the EV plant. When both the Premier and the federal government came to Windsor to announce their investments to establish Canada's largest, or actually North America's largest EV plant at the time, right? But it had to happen fast. They needed to bring in 1 million tons of aggregate, what we know as gravel, right? 1 million tons of aggregate. We do, on average, about 800,000 to 1 million tons a year for all of Windsor-Essex County. In 90 days, we needed to move that amount. You could have moved it by truck, but theoretically, that would have been 50 to 70,000 truckloads traveling from northern Ontario or from Ohio around through the Ambassador Bridge. That impact on our roadways, those costs, those delays, and the environmental impacts would have been horrendous. We brought it in by ship. And in 90 days later, the entire ground was set for construction that we've been seeing all winter and this spring. The new Gordie Howe Bridge. Every ounce of concrete and bit of aggregate that is creating those new plazas and bridge piers, all coming from and through the Port of Windsor. The roadbeds that you'll drive across in about 2 years on top of the deck that you're seeing partially extended across the river now, all those red decks are coming in through the Port of Windsor. So again, that strategic advantage is huge. The ability to move large quantities for large-scale investments and large-scale projects, and then to move large-scale volumes of product out the door, whether it be salt, grain, oil, all that depends on a major port, and Windsor has it.
Fantastic. So from this macro lens of this incredible economic asset that we have in our region that touches almost everything that we do or eat or share or buy, to a little bit more micro.
Okay.
So we're going to pass the mic over to Kyle. And Dr. Bassett here has been working for a number of years in the environmental science space. And Kyle has a really interesting story, and what we're going to focus in on is the software that he's created to really help our municipalities start to tackle the massive job of climate change and mitigating climate impact in our community. And Windsor's really hard at work at this, and actually there's a lot of municipalities locally that are hard at work at this too. And Kyle, why don't you tell us a little bit about your journey as an entrepreneur and how you got started here?
All right, thank you very much, Adam. So this journey began for me about 5 years ago when I was completing my doctorate degree in civil engineering from the University of Windsor. So I've been based here in Windsor and been a huge advocate for the city of Windsor for a very long time. About 5 years ago, I was studying the impacts of the integration of wind turbines onto the Ontario electricity grid, and the way that that introduction of renewable energy was going to impact our climate futures. So during this time, I began becoming very, very interested in how public policy was going to impact our climate trajectories and our climate futures. And so coming around 4 years ago, I was presented with the opportunity to serve as the community energy planner for the city of Windsor. In fact, I would be at that desk over there in the corner, riding the bike, demonstrating how energy worked for kids and engaging with the public. So those of you who don't know anything about me, you'd realize that I absolutely love data, research, equations, the technical nitty-gritty stuff. And so when I was brought and had the opportunity to serve in the public sector, you can imagine that that was a very unique perspective to bring to that public space. So over the course of the 3 years that I was with the City of Windsor, I was able to really immerse myself in that climate action planning environment and engage with municipalities basically across the country. And so during that engagement, I began to identify roadblocks that were not only affecting Windsor here locally, because really Windsor was leading in a lot of ways, but I was able to identify roadblocks that were affecting not only one community, but the whole system across Canada. And so over the past 2 years, I've been working to develop and implement software to help alleviate these pain points for municipalities, helping them unlock their data and supporting data-driven climate change management.
So cool. So what WeTech Alliance does and how we sort of fit into this. Kyle working on a problem that he experienced on the job is something that we preach to all 189 of the clients in our portfolio. Figure out what problem you're trying to solve, approach it and attack it, and figure out where the solutions lie so that way you can make a big difference, not just for the problem that you're solving, but more industry-wide. And so looking at that as a perspective is one of the ways that we actually coach a lot of the clients that come into our portfolio. And so Kyle did a great job of this, and it's so cool to see it living and breathing in motion. And so Kyle, you found this incredible, massive problem that's industry-wide. Every municipality is dealing with this. Every municipality now has to track this type of data. And maybe talk a little bit about why that's so valuable. Why do they have to track this stuff? And how does it unlock opportunities for municipalities like Windsor?
Very good question. So I feel like that ties into a saying that we've all heard a lot throughout our lives, or maybe in passing, but we can't manage what we don't measure. And so right now, when you look at the landscape of municipalities across Canada, so many are still flying blind in terms of knowing exactly what their quantifiable environmental impacts as well as opportunities are. So this is all about supporting the data-driven approach, because in the field of climate change, there's a lot of differing perspectives, and there's a lot of, in fact, sometimes kind of butting heads on different elements and aspects of this. But one area where I feel like there's such commonality is that we're all after the same thing, and we're all after reduced environmental impact and growing community benefits. And so data is a great equalizer in this area because it's impartial. The mathematical models are the same regardless of which side of the aisle you're running it from. And so by turning to the data, I feel we can find a huge common ground for making progress forward.
So let's dive into that. Because you've got, I think, a thread here. You've got a private entity like the Port Authority that is driving so much innovation and delivering so much across the entire region. And then you've got municipalities that are trying really hard to make sure that they're creating an environment where entities like the port can exist in a way that's mitigating the impact they have on the environment. And so when you look at that type of data, tell us a little about Circa. What did you end up creating to sort of solve the problem that you were running into?
Yeah, so basically created a way for municipalities of any size, of any staffing level, to now have the same level of climate change data analysis that you would see from an international major city. So actually, in our most recent implementation, just this week, we're working with the fastest growing municipality in Canada to develop a plan that even though they may only be 25,000 people currently, they're doing the level of work that you would see in Vancouver or Toronto, and they're gaining the benefits from having that data. And so that's a really, really exciting thing that we're seeing with the implementation, is it's all about unlocking it for not just the big cities. It's about providing equity and allowing communities of all sizes, including the regions around Windsor itself, to benefit from these climate opportunities and the low carbon transition ahead.
So Kyle, as you know, you've worked with me now for 3 years. I'm not that smart. Break it down for me in a way that everyone here is going to understand. What exactly does your software do, and why is it different from what's out there on the market today?
Very good question. So basically what the software does is it allows municipalities to enter in very, very quickly the vital information that's required to perform an industry standard greenhouse gas energy and cost inventory. So right now in Canada, municipalities are, I can say, aspiring to be able to report and disclose their greenhouse gas emissions on an annual basis. But the challenge with that is that so many municipalities don't have the resources to be able to meet that reporting and data analysis standard. And so basically the software is a turnkey solution that allows anyone to plug in their basic 10 metrics and have pages and pages of data analysis to be able to harness insights and use for stakeholder engagement.
Very cool. So take us through a little bit about how, from where you started, what were the pivots that you had to make, and what was that journey you made from like sort of then to now? You came up with this, or you decided that this was the problem you wanted to tackle. You went and decided to figure out how to solve it. How did you go about that, and then where did your journey take you next?
Well, the journey started with, I would encourage any starting or any entrepreneurs starting and looking to start a business to leverage the resources that's locally available to them. So I had actually spent about 8 months out west in a cabin learning to code at the start of this. I knew that in order to take on this endeavor, I needed to learn how to program in several languages, and so I kind of created the opportunity. I was determined, went into this cabin and said, by the time I come out, I'm going to be able to write this software package. So as I came out of this, I came into the loving arms of WeTech, who were able to really nurture and help me throughout this development phase and support me in this recent contest last year, the Scale Up contest, which I was able to participate in and successfully win. And so basically, by leveraging the local resources here, working closely with WeTech, as well as engaging with municipalities across Ontario and the country, we've met with virtually 70 municipalities at this point, gaining feedback and input. And so, yeah, that's been the process, been really vital to get us to the point now where we have a fully functional software, operational and deployed with Canadian municipalities who are now gaining the benefits.
That's incredible. If anyone's ever spent 8 months inside of a cabin, the results of that are usually just sleep. It's not learning several coding languages. If I had the opportunity, I'm going to learn how to fish, and I'm going to train some squirrels how to do my bidding. Like, it is not. So if you look at sort of that journey and the one that you've taken, tell us a little bit about the work that you're doing with those municipalities, because there's a lot of exciting stuff going on there. And why is it so important that these small municipalities and municipalities like Windsor have access to this? Because there's a lot of competition out there for the kind of funding that they're looking to get to help mitigate these programs.
Absolutely, the funding aspect is critical. So when there is a massive amount of federal funding as well as provincial funding, mostly federal, where municipalities compete by proving policy alignment. So they need to demonstrate that the green actions that they're proposing to gain funding for are consistent with their city policies and codified in city policies. And so by providing this very, very streamlined, low cost and effective route for getting them that data, they can then show that policy alignment and compete with much, much, much bigger municipalities to get a larger proportion of that funding pot. And so really taking that equity approach, being able to distribute the benefits of this climate transition for not only the large cities, but small municipalities as well.
So you have this example here of the city of Windsor leveraging innovation to really even the playing field, give them access, and much smaller municipalities too, that previous to this never had this opportunity. They wouldn't have the bandwidth, they wouldn't have the resources, they wouldn't have the manpower. And now they've got a tool that can do all of that for them, and it really put them on the same stage and same playing field as places like Toronto and Calgary and
Absolutely.
massive, massive metropolitan places across our country. That's a really cool thing to do. And how cool is it that it's happening in our backyard and that we get first crack at that type of technology here to make our city better? That's amazing. So Kyle, thank you so much. So Kyle, you've pitched in front of Clean Air Partnerships, 38 municipalities across Ontario, correct? You're working with a number right now. What are the best practices? What is the cheat sheet that you can give to Windsor and the businesses here, the Port Authority, that can help us get a bit of an edge when it comes to lowering our climate impact?
Well, I guess from my perspective, the first point is data. Finding who the data gatekeepers are within your own corporation or within your own municipality, and then engaging with them, because everything runs off of data. And so being able to establish those relationships early on in the process are so critical. And then from there, letting them know that you're not just asking for this data once, but this data is going to be requested continuously, year over year at a minimum, as part of that continuous accountability and reporting. So really finding where your key data sources are and creating a framework for getting consistent and frequent updates of that data.
Very cool. So we've got some inside knowledge on how the city of Windsor is leveraging its innovation to really sort of build something special here and really tap into these programs that are helping us move the city forward. Steve, what does the future look like for the port, and how are you sort of moving things forward as well? Because I know we had a conversation at Steve's office, which he didn't invite me on a boat. I'm very upset about, but anyways, that's for later. And he kind of said to me that the platform that these ships run on, there's a 60-year half-life to them. You can't just replace a ship anytime there's new technology that comes out. And so what innovation looks like in shipping is very different. You got to make do with what you have, and you have to sort of make the best of it. So what do you see for the next 20 years in terms of the port?
Well, the first thing I want to say is, Kyle, I want the software. So it sounds wonderful.
Excellent.
It's not just for municipalities. So, thanks, Adam. I mean, this is the reality, right? When we are talking about how we make differences, there's a lot of small differences we can make. We can buy more fuel-efficient cars. We can buy hybrid electric cars. We can use electric equipment, in our ports, and we do that, right? We can change the lighting to, LED panels. We did that. We sponsored the board of the Port Authority and spends about 3% of its revenues a year on community support. Remember, I said we have 3 values: economy, social, and environment. And we have a board member right over here, actually, with Cooper Hawks Vineyards. Tom, wave to us. He's one of our board members. And the board's very committed to community. And we actually just recently paid to have the panels at the Sandwich Teen Action Group Center completely changed over to LED. Not good for the environment, but good for them, because over the next 10 years, it's going to give them $100,000 available in program. They're no longer spending on power. Mm-hmm. So, there's environment, there's social. And so we do a lot of these little things all the time. I mean, we plant trees. We, with the community all through our port. We green neighborhoods. But those little items matter a lot and they add up quickly. It's what we all do individually. But the big items that are going to make, remember I said 3%, of the world's GHG, those big items have big long-term solutions. We all know about the great promise of hydrogen. Hydrogen is many, many years away yet. We can produce hydrogen now. There's a big announcement in Michigan. There's one in Texas. There's one on the East Coast. And we're going to hear a lot of announcements of massive new hydrogen production. But of course, the next question that begs is, how do you distribute that hydrogen? So you got to have fueling facilities for trucks and rail, planes, and at ports. And those are expensive infrastructures. And deliver it to what customer? Thank you, Adam. The truth is, when we are building ships today, they're going to exceed the 2050 deadline for net zero. We're not going to achieve that. But that's not reason to not try to do the best we can with the best available technology, with the best data and information we have available to us today. So ships that are being designed today are moving to biodiesel. Port Windsor is the sole provider of biodiesel on the Great Lakes. Biodiesel coming from soybean waste meal. So this is stuff that would have been, I don't know what they do with it. It's waste. It's not animal feed even. So we're not diverting from the food chain. We're not, using food products. We're not using crops to run ships. We are taking waste and producing fuel out of it now. That's going to be the next solution for the next 5-10 years, for ships, probably for trucks and rail. And I even hear that airplanes want to use it. So the truth is, we produce only about 1/10 of the biofuel we need today. We're going to have to massively ramp up biofuel. We're going to have to massively look at how the tax structure around that. Right now, the biofuel that we're supplying in Windsor is produced in Canada, shipped to the States, where when it comes back, it's a tax credit. If it was bought in Canada, we would pay a federal excise tax on it that makes it non-competitive. So we got to think about, if we're going to promote green, we got to align tax and regulations with it. The other thing, after biodiesel, we're probably heading to methanol and following that somewhere in the 30s. And we can produce that pretty quickly from natural gas, from hydrogen. We can do a lot of, it's easy to produce it, but again, you have to produce it in sufficient quantities to supply the market, and you got to find distribution channels. And of course, the ship that was built today that run on bunker or diesel or biodiesel has to be changed, or it has to be designed and built today in anticipation of these evolving fuels, because the shipping companies and the marine industry massively committed to getting to zero. But the technology is not there today, and they got to build the ship today, and it's going to last them 50 years. A sea ship, ocean ships, salty we call them, 25 years. They'll build ships with hydrogen one day, and so will we, but not till 2060 or 2070. And so we have to adapt along the way and plan for the evolving nature of fuels. We all anticipate somewhere in the 2040s, hydrogen will likely become commercially and technically viable. But we have to move products today, and we have to build today, and we're going to have this equipment for a while. So, I was telling folks just before we came up to the stage here, the engine in a ship, in a Great Lakes ships that you see going down the Detroit River, it's about the size of this whole room. You can't put a block and chain and pull it out and put a new engine in that runs on methanol or hydrogen. That ship is for life. And so we can adapt, and that's exactly what they're doing. They're bringing in new technologies. The ships that are running on biodiesel today ran on bunker 10 years ago, ran on real diesel 5 years ago, and are running on biodiesel today. And hopefully we can continue to adapt and change these ships. They're also doing remarkable things with hull design, new engineering, hull designs that lessen resistance. There's new technologies that are just like our car, where there's computers on board that monitor our gas-air ratio in our engine about every 10 times or 50 times a second. They're doing that on ships now. It's actually speeding up the engine, slowing it down, changing the propeller speed, the pitch of the propeller. It's doing it several times a second. And that they've now reduced the fuel usage and GHG emissions by 30% with these new changes. So we as an industry, we're vastly committed to this. both on the fuel supply side and on the technology side and on the equipment we use. So a lot of little things and some big things, but the big things are going to need big investments. I'll give you a quick example. Toronto Cruise, this is from Toronto. Toronto Port Authority has a large cruise industry and large terminal on cruise terminal. And the cruise ships are ideal ships for electrical supply when they're in ports. They don't have to run their engines. So the cruise industry said, can you run power line out so we can tap in? Now, they're not talking about an extension cord from our garage. It's a pretty big service. And Hydro One wanted $5 million to run the line out to the ship. So they get about 50, 70 ships a year in Toronto. Divide that into $1 million. You are never going to make that economically viable. So there's going to be a trade-off between, what is the environmental good versus the economic realities. And at some point, it'll be, the technology will catch up and surpass the economic argument. But until it does, we're going to need government engaged. And I see Andrew Dowie in the room today. I can't speak a lot about it, but tomorrow the Minister of Transportation for Ontario is going to be making a significant announcement at the Great Lakes Premier Governors Conference in Cleveland. And that is going to be a statement that for up till now, Ontario is the only jurisdiction of 8 states and 2 provinces in the Great Lakes that didn't have a strategy for marine, to make greater use of marine, to reduce congestion, to reduce emissions, to enhance and improve and empower our industries and communities to have, to strengthen the supply chain. That's going to all change tomorrow. And this is the first government in the history of this province that's taken that bold initiative. So thank you, Andrew, and your government.
So it's amazing to hear about how this age-old industry continues to evolve. It's amazing to see how our city and region is leveraging new innovations to drive these greenhouse emission reductions. And just show of hands, who the heck is super overwhelmed with how the heck they as individuals contribute to lowering their own footprint? Like this is important stuff, and it's really hard to wrap our heads around. And I think what Steve sort of hit on today was much like the port, be like the port. If you take a message away, be like the port, I think is what you're going to take away from this. But it's the little things. It's looking at your own feet and the immediate area around them and seeing what are you able to do in your home, in your neighborhood, in your community as business owners, and there's so many out here today, as government officials, that makes an impact today that might be small, but together those things add up to be something quite mighty. So gentlemen, thank you so much for chatting me with it today, and thank you for being here and taking the time. It was such a pleasure to have the opportunity to talk to you. Do we have any questions from the audience before we wrap things up? Yes, sir. So if you didn't hear the impossible question that Steve's about to solve for everybody, is it takes a little bit longer to ship things from place to place. And that involves some enhanced infrastructure and a little bit more work as well than what we currently have, even though that it is more economically sustainable. How do you approach that as a problem as we look to ship more things in the near future?
Well, thank you for the question. So first of all, the marine industry has invested billions of dollars in the last 10 years in new infrastructure, new ships, new ports, new equipment, and new technologies. And we estimate there's in the next 10 years, this country is going to need about $150 billion in new in funding. And we've been working with the federal government to free up our ability to leverage that from industry and from banks to enable ports to do that across 17 ports. And as I mentioned just in my previous comment there, Ontario has announced that they have also recognized the value of ports and are going to step into the table to ensure that regulations and supports to the industry will be there. So it's going to take partnership. It's going to take big investments, and ports are willing to do that. I mean, I think most people know that the port's a federal agency. I think what almost no one knows is we get zero tax dollars. We are completely self-funded. We run like a business. We operate on margins that sustain our operations and allow us to invest in the community and to our ports down the road. And that is going to include investment in new technology, new ports. So to your question, you're absolutely right. Look at if you have to have cucumbers from a Leamington greenhouse to a Meyer warehouse in 72 hours, and they do, because I used to work in that industry, ship's not a good idea. But every month, 100,000 containers come into Ontario from Montreal. Very few of those containers have perishable goods. Very few, almost negligible. They're all long-term, solid, durable goods and consumer products and industrial supplies. Those are perfect candidates. The economic impact, the cost of trucking and railing those to Toronto and Windsor or to Chicago make no sense as compared to the alternative shipping. The environmental impacts, of course, from a truck, 1/9. I think we've all driven on the 401 between Kingston and London. It's horrible, and the trucks are as thick there as they are on here in line. So we can remove 100,000 containers. You could probably take 25,000 trucks out on the road from from 1 month just from containers. So I think there are alternatives, for the industry. And that's why about 3-4 months ago, we announced that Windsor will be developing Windsor Essex Container Terminal with our partner Moreterm. So again, public-private partnerships. And we are going to develop Windsor's first container port. It'll be one of the first 3 container ports in Ontario. And it's the evolution of moving forward to strengthen and to make our supply chain resilient, but it also provides new economic opportunity for our regional businesses and industry. I have a good friend who works, I shouldn't mention the name, so he works with a very large auto supplier here and across the United States. And during COVID, he was complaining about what containers were costing. A container used to be about $2,500 from China, and they got about 20. He goes, "Do you know what I'm paying?" I said, "Yeah, about 20 grand." He goes, "No, I just paid 28,000 on the spot market for 1 container." I said, "I have no idea you use containers." He goes, "We're bringing in like 200 a month to Windsor Essex." So this is one of my best friends, and I didn't know they were using containers. And I think, now that we are building, we'll be ready in about 2 years. Even those companies that are using containers are going to have a new option, a cheaper option, a lower environmental footprint option. But secondly, there are going to be many industries that are going to say, we never used containers because it wasn't available. We didn't have a local service. We get calls every week. I want to ship something. I want to bring something in. Sorry, we don't do containers. But now we will. The very first question I got in my meet and greet in the first week in the job, I went to ADM. I said, the largest oil crushing plant on the Great Lakes. And they said, "So how soon are you going to get into containers?" And being a newbie, I said, "We don't do containers." And he told me that they're at a competitive disadvantage because they can't ship into Africa and other markets unless it's containerized in many South American countries. Because in those countries, they are designed to deal with containers and bring them into the interior. They don't do bulk goods. That's an old technology. And so, the future is containerization, short sea shipping, and export with containers. And I said it's a green solution, and it's an economic solution, and it's a growth solution.
Ladies and gentlemen, please join me in thanking Port Authority of Windsor Essex, Climate Neutral Technologies. Thank you both for such a great conversation, and thank you to all the partners for today's event. So I just want to shout out here to Liz, who is the mastermind behind the YQGgreen Expo. She's a community builder here in Windsor Essex, and the vision behind tonight's event and the amazing event that's going to take place tomorrow, where people can drop off literally anything and have it recycled and commit to this waste reduction that we're all taking a part in. So Liz, thank you so much, and Mark as well. Yeah.
Say thank you to everybody, especially to you, Adam. I know you've been working with me and Stephen to get this going. I really appreciate it. Stephen, presenting sponsor for Authority, we thank you for this. All this would have been possible without your support. So again, thank you. And that is saying to come in for last minute. So I appreciate it. We did put the mayor was going to be there. Unfortunately, something came up. So thank you very much for showing up. You did awesome. So thank you so much. And all the sponsors named on this big billboard that's been on the GFL truck going for 7 weeks around the city. If you see my social media, I've been hunting them down the garbage men and recycling. It's probably who is that woman going, trying to take selfies with it. So I just want to say we've been really thankful for all our partners, including Nora from the city of Windsor, Nora Romero. I would have not done this without you. I just want to say a huge thank you. Tech Alliance, obviously, Liver Credit Union, Contents Processing Center, I think they just left. You know, the Essex Solid Waste Authority. I'm not gonna name all of them, but all of you guys that are here, please purchase some drinks from Wolf Head and wanted to say thank you for supporting our event today. I really appreciate it. And all the wonderful people are here, part of YQGgreen. Thanks.
Thank you, ladies and gentlemen. Have a great evening.
Thank you.